Imagine a liquid so precious, so utterly vital, that it has saved the lives of millions. Yet it flows not from a bank vault or a rare natural spring, but from a creature that hasn't evolved in 450 million years. A living fossil with 10 eyes, a spiked tail, and a shell that looks like a warrior's helmet. This is the Atlantic horseshoe crab. Its blue blood is a cornerstone of American medicine, the hidden guardian ensuring every vaccine, every surgical implant, and every dose of IV fluid is safe. But the story of how this ancient marine arthropod became entangled with the cutting edge of 20th century pharmaceutical science and the astonishing ecological crisis it now faces is one of the most unbelievable, life-saving, and ethically complex chapters in modern U.S. history. It all started not with the cure, but with a terrifying invisible killer that plagued American healthcare for decades: endotoxins. Endotoxins are lipopolysaccharides, or LPS, that form the cell wall of gram-negative bacteria. While the bacteria themselves could be killed by heat sterilization, a process that became standard in the early 1900s, the endotoxins they left behind were heat stable and stubbornly refused to be neutralized. When these toxins entered the human bloodstream via a contaminated needle, surgical instrument, or intravenous drug, they triggered a violent and often fatal immune response known as pyrogen reaction, or simply fever. In the decades following World War II, as the U.S. medical establishment ramped up mass production of everything from penicillin to saline solutions, this pyrogen problem was an insidious threat. Testing for these invisible poisons was archaic, unreliable, and cruelty-laden, the rabbit pyrogen test. It involved injecting a sample of the medical product into a number of live rabbits and then monitoring their rectal temperature. If the rabbits developed a fever, the product was deemed unsafe. It was slow, expensive, and woefully imprecise, a 6-hour test with a frustratingly high rate of false negatives. The pharmaceutical industry was desperate for a faster, more accurate solution. Enter Dr. Frederick Bang, a visionary pathologist, and his student Jack Levin at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine in the 1950s. Their initial interest had nothing to do with rabbits or IV fluids. They were studying how certain marine animals clot their blood in response to injury. Their focus eventually narrowed to the unassuming horseshoe crab, which thrives in the shallow coastal waters from Maine to the Yucatan Peninsula, particularly around the Delaware Bay. What Bang and Levin discovered in the horseshoe crab's blood was not just a curiosity, but a revolutionary biomedical tool. Unlike vertebrate blood, which uses fibrinogen and platelets for clotting, horseshoe crab blood contains a unique type of cell called an amoebocyte. When a minute amount of gram-negative bacteria, or crucially its endotoxin, comes into contact with these amoebocytes, they instantly rupture and release a clotting protein cascade. This process essentially seals off the bacterial invader. It's an instinctive, chemical defense mechanism that has kept the species alive for 500 million years. Levin, realizing the biomedical implications, meticulously worked to isolate the key component. He successfully developed a powdered, freeze-dried extract from the amoebocytes, which he named Limulus amoebocyte lysate, or LAL. The LAL test was a revelation. A few drops of LAL mixed with a medical solution could detect endotoxin contamination in under an hour and at concentrations that were literally 1,000 times lower than what the clumsy rabbit pyrogen test could register. The pharmaceutical industry in the U.S. saw the LAL test not just as an improvement, but as a genuine game changer. It was fast, reliable, cheaper, and offered an ethical alternative to the rabbit test. the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, officially approved LAL as an acceptable alternative for testing medical devices and injectables in the late 1970s. Overnight, the horseshoe crab became an essential, non-negotiable part of the supply chain for every major U.S. drug company. From the operating room to the pharmacy shelf, modern medicine now hinged on the timely bleeding of this ancient marine creature. The process is as unique as the discovery itself. Each year, specialized vessels collect thousands of adult horseshoe crabs, primarily from the shores of the Delaware Bay, an area that hosts the largest concentration of the species in the world. They are brought to specialized laboratories, often working under the cover of night. There, a needle is carefully inserted near the hinge of the crab's body, and about 30% of its bright blue copper-based blood, hemocyanin, is drawn. The blue blood is quickly processed and the precious LAL is extracted. The crabs are then, in theory, returned to the ocean alive. This incredible demand created a niche but powerful industry. 4 major companies in the U.S. now produce LAL, turning the blue blood into a multi-million-dollar annual revenue stream. But the success story has a dark undercurrent: the toll on the crabs themselves. Word count to this point, 818 words. Outline for continuation, to exceed 1,000 words. To fulfill the 1,000-plus word requirement with a rich, astonishing, and detailed historical narrative, the story will continue with the following sections: the ecological toll and mortality debate, detailing the official statistics, around 15% mortality post-bleeding, versus independent scientific studies that suggest a much higher death rate, some as high as 30%, and the long-term impact on the surviving crab's health and reproductive cycles. The red knot crisis, an unintended victim, explaining how the decline in horseshoe crab populations directly impacts the endangered red-knot shorebird, which depends almost entirely on the crab's eggs in the Delaware Bay as a critical refueling stop during its 9,300-mile migration. This adds a crucial, fascinating layer to the environmental and conservation stakes. The search for a synthetic savior, RFC. Discussing the development of a synthetic alternative to LAL called recombinant factor C, or RFC, which uses genetic engineering to replicate the clotting factor. This section will explore the resistance from some LAL producers, the challenges in FDA adoption, and the ethical, economic debate surrounding a shift to a lab-grown product. The future of LAL and conservation. Concluding with the current state of conservation efforts, the regulatory debates in the U.S., especially in states like South Carolina and Delaware, and the philosophical question of whether the sacrifice of an ancient species is justified by the immediate life-saving benefits of modern medicine.